Money is transitory. It comes, it goes. You didn't start with any. When you leave, you're not taking any with you. All that matters is how you positively impact people's lives. That's it. Entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, have the confidence to make decisions in a timely way and keep moving forward. That's what entrepreneurs do. And they just adjust as they go. To me, the art of business ownership is the ability to consistently make timely, confident decisions with incomplete information. So when I work with people, we start out by just talking about who they are and what they're looking for and what their skills are and what their objectives are and what their lifetime vision is. What do they want to do in their life? What is their long-term vision for where they want to get to? Because the business is not the destination. The business is not the vision. That's not the goal. The business is the vehicle that gets you to your vision, right? The only franchise resale you're ever going to see as an outsider is the one that every single franchisee in the system doesn't want. If you look at any book on wealth creation, right? The fastest road to wealth creation is business ownership.
Actually, the best way to probably buy a resale that you really want is to. What's the secret to finding the best franchises? Think about it. With over 4,000 franchises in the United States alone, there's some that have to be good and some bad. It's just the reality of how it works. So how do you make sure that you choose the right franchise, one of the good ones, so that you don't make a decision that you might regret? Well, ladies and gentlemen, you are in the right place. Recently, I became friends with Rick Bisio, who is a legend in the franchise space, and I wanted to pick his brain. So Rick is the author of the best-selling book, The Educated Franchisee, the how-to book for choosing a winning franchise. I actually read this book just after I signed my franchise agreement in 2015. I wish I would have read it before. But Rick and I didn't hold back. We talked about the devastating mistakes franchise buyers make and how to avoid them. We talked about how to tell when a franchisee might fail. What's the difference between franchisees who are successful versus the ones who aren't successful? The cool thing is that Rick is incredibly direct and transparent. So we also talked about when not to buy a franchise and maybe just stick to being an employee. So you will love this episode and walk away as a more educated franchisee who can make better decisions. Now, if you want to buy or grow your franchise in the next 12 months, you should check out our free resources at franchiseempire.com. And if you want to work with me and my team on finding or buying a franchise or resale business, then you can go to franchiseempire.com/check territory, and you can schedule a free call to see what's available in your area. The link is also in the description below. With that said, sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Franchise Empire Show. They say Rome wasn't built in a day, and building your empire doesn't happen overnight. My name is Tarek Johnson, and owning franchises is what helped me go from employee to employer and start building my empire for my family. So this podcast is for you, the empire builders. For those of you who want to build something that stands the test of time. This is for those of you who are crazy enough to believe that you can make the dream in your head come to life. This podcast is all about bringing you real people who are building real empires so you can get inside their mind and heart and get proven strategies and actionable insights that will catapult you to build, grow, and scale your empire. All right, welcome to another episode of the Franchise Empire Show. I got Rick Bisio here. Thanks for coming on, man. I'm excited to chat.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. So rewind to 2015. My wife and I signed our franchise agreement. And then I thought, holy crap, what did we do? And then I started going out and looking for any sort of books or anything on franchising to be able to learn, like, what do we do from here? How does this work? And I stumbled across your book, bought it, and I thought, oh, geez, I should have bought this before we signed the franchise agreement.
Yeah, the last part probably was useful to you, but beyond that, the rest, yeah, it was already done deal.
Done deal. Yeah. So, man, I've really been looking forward to this chat, and ever since we connected, and and had dinner. Just, man, you're just filled with so much wisdom, and you're kind of an OG in the space. You've been doing this a long time. I say that in the best sort of most respectful ways when I say OG. But what caused you to, what year did you write the book, and what caused you to write the book? Because no one was really doing that in the manner in which you did around franchising kind of at that time. You were really like an innovator.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Nobody, there were no books out there that really told people how to analyze a franchise system and how to analyze themselves. There were really at that time only two books. There were the books about people who had done really well in franchising, right? Here, look how well I did. I'm great. And then there were the other books from attorneys saying, if you don't hire me, you'll lose all your money. And there was nothing really in the middle that says, here's how you actually analyze a franchise. And so back in 2003 and four, I had a lot of people who were saying, I was working with folks and they're like, do you have any of this stuff written down? And I was like, yeah, no, I don't. I'm sorry. And they said, could you write it down? And I was like, no, I don't like to write that much. And I ran into a guy named Mike Kohler, who I was working with, actually became a franchisee, and I was working with him. And he said that to me. I was like, yeah, I don't like to write that much. He says, I know nothing about franchising, but I love to write. Let's do it. And so that's how the book came. So we began in 2005, and I flew him down here to Florida. We spent an entire day together, outlined the book, and we proceeded to go chapter by chapter, recording every chapter. I would record it, he'd write it, he'd send it to me. I'd hate what he wrote. And so then I'd re-edit it, and then he'd edit it, and we'd go backwards and forwards over a period of time, and then we'd go to the next chapter. And the book was finally published in 2008. So there were no other books like it. It was kind of a first swing at a book like that, and it was favorably received. Now it's in its third edition, and I think we've sold over 10,000 copies. And a lot of people, I get emails from people in other countries that are like, this really helped me, and I makes you feel good.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. And we'll have, at this point, I'll have recorded an intro about our conversation that would go, that would people would watch before actually diving into the episode. But for those of you who don't know, the book is The Educated Franchisee, how to choose a winning franchise. And I'm curious, how does that impact you? You mentioned that you've had folks that have reached out from places. What I've found is that making YouTube videos, at least, that I'm impacting people that I have no idea. Like you have no idea the impact you're having, which what I found can be hard sometimes, because sometimes I've questioned myself, am I actually helping? Am I making a difference? And then you get that one random note, right, from someone that goes, wow, I wind up buying, I use your stuff, it's been great. What do those moments mean to you when you get those emails?
It means everything. I mean, money is transitory. It comes, it goes. You didn't start with any. When you leave, you're not taking any with you. All that matters is how you positively impact people's lives. That's it. And I'll tell you a very quick story. I got an email from a guy, probably 17, 18 years old. And this was back probably 5 years ago. And he said to me, sends this email. He says, you've changed my life. He says, I read this book. I know what I want to do. It's not just franchising. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to do this. Can I talk to you? And I was like, sure, we can get on the phone. So he says, well, could we do it via like WhatsApp or whatever? I was like, great. Okay. The guy's in the Ukraine. He's a Ukrainian kid who reads the book, and all of a sudden he wants to be an entrepreneur, and he says it's made a giant. He's got all these questions for me. So we start talking every so often. And then the war breaks out, and I end up sponsoring him. My wife and I, we sponsor him. He's actually in the United States right now building businesses, not franchised businesses, just businesses. He's just this very entrepreneurial kid. And he's probably 22, 23, 24 now. And, but yeah, I mean, that has nothing to do with franchising, nothing to do with money. It has to do with impacting people's lives in a positive way.
My intention with this podcast is to help you build your empire. If you've gotten a single piece of value, one of the best ways you can help me and the podcast is to simply press the like button on YouTube. Lastly, share this podcast. Share it with someone who you know who is an empire builder. Imagine the impact you can have by helping them learn something that can build their business and empire. People will associate the value they got from this information from you, the person that shared it with them, all because you shared it with them. I appreciate you and your support. Let's get back to the episode. Wow, that's incredible. And that's one of the things that I've really admired about you in our conversations is you can tell your intentions, right? And I think in this world right now of just get rich quick schemes overall, and everyone and their mom on the internet promoting this business, this business, this business. And then in the world of just overall franchise consulting and franchise brokerage, I think there's a lot of people that get into it because they hear, hey, you can make a lot of money doing it. And that's why they get into it. And man, I've seen some of the other side of it. And it for a while, it really tainted kind of my perspective and thought, oh man, there's a lot of yucky people out there. What's your overall philosophy on helping people find or buy a franchise?
Wow, that's kind of a big question. The the philosophy. I guess you just start off with the concept that everyone you're working with, you're going to be having dinner with at Christmas. If you just think of it that way, or they're going to be at your house at Thanksgiving. And if you approach it from that angle, that these are family members, these are, people that you're going to be around, and that whatever happens, it's going to come right back at you at Thanksgiving over the turkey, right? And if you approach it from that angle, it creates a different. It no longer is transactional. It's about a relationship, and it's about doing the right thing and sharing the right information and trying to be as honest as possible. I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did. If I did, it would make everything so much easier. But I can always try to be honest and straightforward and share what I know and share where my concerns are, and help people try to make a decision. But I do keep in touch with everybody. So if somebody becomes a franchisee, as a matter of fact, just before this podcast, I was just on the phone with the gentleman I put in business 6 months ago. And he was in his, and I'll be in touch with him, assuming he'll have me. 10 years from now, every 6 months, we'll still be on calls together. And if it's not going well, I hear about it. So my philosophy is I don't want to hear about bad stuff. I want to help people do the right thing. That way I don't have to hear about the bad stuff. And sometimes the right thing's not to be a franchisee, or the timing's not right, or what have you. And that's part of it as well. My business is 100% referral based. It has been for decades. And I get just as many referrals from people who don't buy franchises as I do from people who do buy franchises. And the reason is because I try to make sure they're always making the right decision and that they're comfortable that they are making the right decision.
Yeah, that was one of the things I thought was really interesting when we chatted. When you said that, yeah, I get as many referrals from people who don't buy than who do buy, and a lot of the times you're telling them, "Hey, I don't know that this is the right fit for you or the right path for you," and not that it's always no, maybe it's not right now. What are the signs that you see that either pop up as red flags or yellow flags, or that, hey, maybe either now's not the right time for you, or like just maybe franchising in general is just not a good fit for you?
There are a lot of potential red flags, but the early ones are structural red flags, right? They're not financially liquid. They're not resilient. They don't have financial resiliency. If anything goes wrong, they run out of money and they can't pay their rent, right? These kind of structural issues. Sometimes people just are like, I've got this big bonus coming in 2 years. I don't want to do anything until that bonus comes. Okay, great. Let's hold off for 2 years, right? Um, so there's a lot of structural reasons early on that are pretty easy to identify, right? Um, the second thing is that some people are very entrepreneurial but should not be franchisees. And this is what I call the difference between creative entrepreneurs versus executive entrepreneurs. Some people are very creative in nature. My father was that. My father was a creative entrepreneur. You can tell creative entrepreneurs because often their name's above the door, right? Joe's Pizza. And you walk in there and Joe's there, right? These people really, they gain total satisfaction, not by, they don't need to make the most amount of money. They like their name above the door and knowing the buck stops with them and they can make every decision themselves. So if franchising is about following somebody else's system, right? If that's the value proposition, risk reduction is driven by following a proven system. A lot of these people don't want to follow proven systems. They want to do it themselves. Nothing wrong with that. But they will be unhappy in a franchise system. And so as we're going through the process, if I see that they just aren't able to follow even my system, they got to do it their own way, we'll have a conversation about that. Because I don't want them to get into a franchise. Franchisor tells them something and they're like, yeah, I'm doing my own way, right? It's not going to make them happy. It's not going to make the franchisor happy. You might as well not go down that path. The last part of it is really after somebody has done the due diligence. And this is something, this is a Rick saying, okay? I don't need this. This is my belief system, all right? If you look at the art of business ownership, to me, the art of business ownership is the ability to consistently make timely, confident decisions with incomplete information. That's what business owners do every single day, right? So hiring this new person, are they going to work out? Don't know. Hire them. Let's try, right? New marketing program, is it going to work? Don't know. Let's try it and adjust as we go. Entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs have the confidence to make decisions in a timely way and keep moving forward. That's what entrepreneurs do. And they just adjust as they go. The last piece I see, which is a kind of something I talk to people early in the process and then we review it after they've done all their due diligence. If I find people are asking more and more questions that are less and less relevant, if they're not sleeping well at night, if they're uncomfortable making a decision, these types of things are red flags to me, because even if they make the decision to become a business owner, every time they have to make a decision, every day they're put forward, they're going to have trouble making those decisions. And I see this often coming from people who come from industries where exactness is important. So if the person designs bridges, for an example, you can't get it wrong. If you get it wrong, it falls down. It has to be correct. And they are used to being in a world where everything is absolutely correct before they pull the trigger. And if they're not able to transition their mindset into a world of inexactness, which is what business ownership is, they will have a hard time with it. And so these are just conversations we have. And I don't tell them what they have to think. I just present them with that question, and then they have to determine, is this going to be an issue for me, or can I do it?
Yeah. What do you think that people can change their kind of wiring overall? Because I know that for me, that was not that I was ever like an engineer or anything like that, but exactness and precision was something that I was kind of wired with early on. And I found that my first 8 years of trying to start businesses on my own, that contributed to a lot of my failure, because I would get, overwhelmed and confused and so on and so forth. So what's your perspective on people being able to overcome that because they have this maybe desire so deep that they want to be an entrepreneur, but their way that they currently think and operate does not support that?
Yes, people can change. Absolutely. It has to do with how much desire they have. And unfortunately, it's not quantifiable. I don't know how to go about doing it, but I heard a story earlier this week, which I thought was really fascinating. It took me back in when I started in franchising, it was 1994. My very first deal I was working on. And in 1994 with Popeye's Chicken and Biscuits. And I went to my boss, the president of International. I said, I've got this guy, he really wants to do it, but I'm worried he may not be right for it. He may not be able to be successful. And he said to me, he says, the problem is we don't know. He says, the people who you think are going to be highly successful will not be as successful as you think. And sometimes those people we think might not be successful become very successful. There's something inside of a person, a drive that either makes it work or doesn't, and you cannot from the outside see that. They either they're going to do it or they're not. And earlier this week, I was talking to another franchise coach, a very good friend of mine, and she told us a story. She said there was a lady that she was a gentleman, I guess she was working with. Anyhow, was on an oxygen tank when they were looking at franchises. She says, "Do you have any physical limitations?" He says, "I can't breathe without my oxygen tank. I can't walk." He's going through this thing. He's going through all this rehabilitation stuff, trying to learn how to walk and breathe again, right? And she says, maybe we should not jump into a franchise, into a business. We should focus on health, maybe. And he was like, "No, I really want to do this." And he's the new franchisee of the year for this franchise.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
So you just don't know sometimes. You'd think that this would be the kind of person that would have everything else on their mind and be unable to succeed. But I think anyone can succeed if they believe enough in themselves and they're willing to do what's necessary to, that internal fortitude. It can be done, but not everybody should do it. Not everybody's designed to do it. Not everybody really wants to do it.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's interesting when you brought up that story. It made me think about Tom Brady. I never really watched football that much, and for whatever reason, the last year or so, I've been just really into the draft process, how they select coaches, players, and I think I'm starting to respect and admire the business element and how it translates into some of the things that I'm doing with team building and trying to find talent in people and so on and so forth. But Tom Brady's story of, basically being number 6 or number 7 in line at college and only getting to get 1 or 2 snaps at practice. And he went to the school psychologist and he said, "Look, I don't even have a chance to prove myself here because I'm only getting 2 snaps." And the sports psychologist, I'm sorry. And the sports psychologist said, "Well, all you can do is go out there and do those 2 snaps the best you possibly can." And so he would start to sprint on and off the field and be highly intentional. And then he got 5 snaps and 10 snaps and so on. And, as a lot of people famously know, that Tom Brady was not a first round draft pick. And it's just interesting because you have all these guys, the football draft is coming up now. And you got all these guys that are big hot prospects. And oftentimes most of these number 1 picks overall don't wind up doing that well in the NFL. And so I think it's fascinating because you can't see what's on the inside of someone.
It's really hard. Everybody says, "Oh, why can't you figure it out?" NFL, they can't figure it out. They got hundreds of millions of dollars they spend trying to figure out who the right people are, and they still can't figure it out. It's hard to know what's inside a person. It really is. It's very hard to know what's inside a person. So
Yeah. What do you see that what are some of the mistakes that franchise buyers make that you think can be unavoidable or that you've kind of see as a pattern? Because I'm sure you probably over the years have people that reach out to you after they've gone and bought independently, right? And kind of did it on their own and they go, help, I made a mistake.
yeah. And I'm like, I can't help you too much at that point. But if you're in the wrong franchise and you're, at that point of desperation, it's kind of hard. It's kind of like you've gone down the road all the way to the end of the road, but you're on the wrong road, and that's a problem. That's a real problem. So um, when people start looking for franchises, a lot of times what they do is they just jump on the internet. Right? They're like saying, "Oh, franchise opportunities in my area," or "best franchises," or "hot franchises." They start Googling stuff. Um, and there's so many ways in which people, I think, start off the path wrong. Um, I mean, the most common way, and you've probably seen this a lot, is people get onto the internet and there's like best franchises, right? And they end up on this top 50 franchises in America list, which has nothing to do with anything to do with whether it's available in their area, whether they'd be good at it, whether it's a successful franchise. All it means is they're selling a lot of franchises and it's popular. I call that the lemming approach. Everyone's a lemming. They all go and they'd all jump off the cliff together, right? And there's a lot of stories over the last 20 years that I can tell you of lemming concepts that popped up. Thousands of people jumped on and they all lost their money. So lemming approaches are number one. The second one is passion approaches. I really love to ride my bicycle, so look for bicycle shops. I like to play my guitar, so I want a music shop. Um, has nothing to do with what you should be looking at right at the beginning. There's some people who look at their neighbors, or they look at scarcity. That's another approach. They look at their neighborhood and says, our neighborhood doesn't have a good sandwich shop, so we need a sandwich shop. Has nothing to do with what they should be doing. They're looking at what the neighborhood needs, right? That's scarcity. Some people look at their neighbors. My neighbor's doing really well. He's in whatever. I want to do that. There's so many ways. And so when the only way to really do is to start at the beginning before somebody has committed and built a business and it's not working. You have to start way before that. And so when I work with people, we start out by just talking about who they are and what they're looking for and what their skills are and what their objectives are and what their lifetime vision is. What do they want to do in their life? What is their long-term vision for where they want to get to? Because the business is not the destination. The business is not the vision. That's not the goal. The business is the vehicle that gets you to your vision, right? So the real goal is to kind of create a really clear written description of what perfect might look like. And you do that before you look at any franchises. After you have that, then you start looking at franchises, and now you have this anchor you've thrown out, right? This definition of what perfect looks like. And as you analyze franchises, you can compare them against what you originally wanted and make sure you didn't get sold something that's not good for you, right? That you didn't drift off your anchor. And that's kind of the process. But if somebody's already signed a franchise agreement, spent the franchise fee, opened the business, I can give them advice, and I speak to people every week who call me with that issue. I can give them advice, but I can't do much to untangle what's already been created.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying the podcast episode so far. One of the most consistent things that we hear from people that reach out to us is that buying a franchise feels really confusing. There's so many options out there. It's a scary decision. They don't know how to vet or do the due diligence or really narrow down on the right franchise for them, and then they really feel alone in the process. You might be the only one in your family who's ever pursued buying a franchise or being an entrepreneur, or maybe you've tried to start a side hustle before, or other businesses like me. Like before franchising, I was not able to crack the code on entrepreneurship. I'd like to invite you to reach out and work with us. We've helped many clients buy franchises, get them profitable, or buy resale businesses that are thriving. I'm talking about highly profitable resales, great value. We've allowed many of our clients to actually quit their job right away and replace their income immediately. So if you want to work with me and my team on finding or buying a franchise, doing due diligence, vetting it, or resale, then go ahead and go to tarzjohnson.com/consulting, and we're happy to see if we can help. All right, enjoy the rest of the episode. And when you get those calls, those emails, what seems to be their main issue and challenge that they're struggling with, and how much of it do you think is possibly a franchisor thing and buying the wrong franchise versus this person is not at the leadership level that they need to be at in order to run their business correctly? And they're in the right vehicle, they just don't know how to drive the vehicle.
There are some cases that are like the latter that you say. I mean, the person's in a good franchise. I know it's a good franchise. They have the basic skills, but they just aren't putting it together. And in those scenarios, finding an outside coach, finding a group of people that you can talk to, because there's the franchisor will often give them coaching on how to run the business, but there isn't always coaching on how to be a business owner, I guess. And so I think that you've done some work in that area, and there are people who really benefit from that because they're not at the end of the road, right? They're at the beginning, but they're confused and they don't know how to handle what it means to be a business owner. And those individuals really could benefit. But there are other people that are just in the wrong franchise. They have no money left. They have the wrong skill set. They were sold something that's not right for them. And really all they can do is get out.
Yeah, and I want to come back to your point in just a minute around, sometimes, people buy into kind of like what's the next hot thing and then kind of fall down that path a little bit. But before we do that, you mentioned, someone getting clear on their vision first, which I'm a huge advocate of that. And I just love that process overall. Because if you don't know what the end result looks like, you just kind of wander. You just start picking paths randomly, really, and you can end up in a destination that is not at all where you want to be. You had an email recently that I really liked when you talked about how people are trying to go out there and hit a home run, when probably all they need is a base hit. And so, like, what happens when someone goes, okay, my vision is year one of my business, I want to make 150K profit. And year two, I want to make, $600,000 and leave my job, but I want to buy one territory. And, I want it all to happen like completely smoothly. So what
With no risk.
with no risk?
Why not, right? That would be my response if they said that. I'd say, oh, and you want no risk too, I bet. Because it's obviously a joke. I mean, they know that's not possible. I mean, if they don't know that's not possible, they live in some other world, right? But the fact is that, you know, if that was possible, wouldn't everybody do that? So we just talk about what's real. I say, would you be interested in a business if in the first year you didn't take any money home at all? You might have made some money, but you reinvested it in growth instead of taking it home. Would that be acceptable? Or do you absolutely need income of that amount in the first year? Is that something you need or just kind of a hope? And if the person says, no, I really need that, I will suggest a job. Because that's where you're going to get $100,000 of income in your first year. You're not going to get that from a business, not in your first year, not normally.
Unless you buy a resale.
Well, okay, you could look at a resale. That's true. But when you buy $100,000 of income, it's going to cost you $350,000 of cash or investment of risk. And so a lot of times the person says, I need $100,000 of income because I don't have any money. Well, if you don't have $350,000 to invest in a business, you're probably not going to buy $100,000 of income. It's 3.5x, 3x, 4x. It's kind of a normal multiplier, right? And a lot of times people don't realize that they're like, oh, I'm just going to buy that, but they don't realize the multiplier cost of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. We had someone that was looking at a resale and it was selling for over 900K. I think it was either 900 or 950. And this person thought, oh, that makes me so nervous that like $900,000 is so much money. And so we had to take a step back and, educate him. Like, when you say it's a lot of money, like, well, one, why do you feel that way? And what do you mean by that? The number is a large amount, but in a resale, the more expensive it is, that means the more money it's making. That's actually a good thing.
Should be, yes. That
Should be. Yeah, in this case, it was. So, and it's like, people see these, oh, it's only 100 grand. It's only 150 grand. That typically means they're not making money or they're even losing money, right? What's your perspective on resales overall?
I think that there's some great resales out there. I also think that people spend too much time trying to look for the perfect resale, which is very hard to find. So and I own franchiseresales.com, so I spend a little bit of time on resales. And I'm not against resales, but here's the world of resales. All right. On one hand, you have the $100,000 investment resales. These resales are what I call the broken business. All right. These are the resales that aren't making any money. The person's trying to recoup their investment as much as possible. They need to get out. It's like buying a broken car. So if you're a mechanic and you know what's wrong with the car and you know what it'll cost to fix the car, you know what to spend on the car or whether you should buy it or not. I mean, there's a big difference between worn brake pads versus a thrown rod, right? In regard to what it's going to cost to fix the car. So if you're a mechanic and you really know the difference and you can see the business, you know what it's going to cost to fix it, probably you can get a really good deal. But in most cases, people aren't proven business operators of that business, and they're not really the mechanic, you might say, right? They look at it because it's cheap, but then they get into it and they don't know what to do with it, and it ends up being a lot more expensive than they expect. That's the broken business. The other end is what everybody really thinks they want, which is the business that's hitting on all cylinders. It's making massive amounts of money. It's at capacity. It's people lined up down the road every day. That's what everybody thinks they want. But the reality is those businesses sell at a higher multiplier. They're highly desirable. Everybody's lined up to want to buy them. So they've got choices to who to sell it to, and they can get a premium price for it. The real problem is that there's no upside potential for that business. You can't grow it in most cases. In most cases, it's at 90, 95% capacity already. But there is a real probability of shrinkage. If you go from 90 to 80% capacity, you're losing a 4.5x multiplier on the valuation side. So your downside risk on those really exceptional businesses is much higher than your upside opportunity. So I think that there are those are, everybody thinks they want them, but I think there's risk with those businesses. The one that's the ideal business is the one that's making 50,000, 100,000. It's been in business a couple of years. Everything's exactly where it should be. It's growing. It's reasonably priced. It's with a good franchise system. And I'll give you an example of a real scenario, but then I'll tell you how it got sold, okay? So back a number of years ago, I worked with a gentleman who bought 2 territories with Budget Blinds. Budget Blinds, awesome franchisor, one of the best in the United States, 1,100 franchisees, incredibly successful organization, right? He bought 2 territories here in Florida, and he ran it for about 18 to 20 months. And then he called me up, because again, I try to keep in touch with everybody. He called me up, he says, I have to sell the business. I'm like, why? Everybody does well. Why are you not doing well? He says, no, I'm doing really well. He says, everything's right on target. I'm actually ahead of where I should be. I'm making money with it, but I got to sell it. I said, why do you have to sell it? He says, I just got called up for active duty. They're shipping me out to Djibouti, which is actually a country. I didn't realize that Djibouti was a country. I had to look it up. And I have a master's in international business, and I didn't know Djibouti was a country. It's next to Somalia. It's not a place you want to be shipped to for 2 years. But he said, I got to sell the business. I'm being shipped out in a month. What should I do? Well, I suggested to him that he call the franchisees around him and see if they had an interest. Within a week and a half, 2 weeks later, both of the North and the South Territory were both under contract. The North Territory went to the franchisee to the north. The South Territory went to the franchisee to the south. And he went to Djibouti. Yeah. But that's how the really good resales that have a good reason for selling at the right thing at the right price with good franchises often will go to fellow franchisees. There are good opportunities out there, but that's the one everybody wants. But usually the local franchisees learn about it ahead of time, and they often will pick up those territories if it's properly priced.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, actually, and that was a great story. Because in our last weekly newsletter, I actually said, because I talk about resales a lot. I think they're fascinating. I bought a resale, a turnaround, one of those $100,000 resales in a system that I was already in, had a successful store.
You're a mechanic in that case. That's good.
Yeah, but it was harder than I thought. The market was very different because it was on the opposite side of the country. There was a lot that I didn't know. We used a different food supplier distributor. The cost was actually a little bit higher. It was actually there was actually a lot that it was like, okay, that was a great learning opportunity.
Opportunity for mental expansion.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But yeah, in the newsletter, I did say that about resales, which is that the best way to probably buy a resale that you really want is to find the franchise system that you want to be in, buy new, and be patient and build a relationship with your neighboring franchisees, and then be able to buy theirs at some point,
Absolutely correct. That's the way with bigger systems. That's the only way to do it. With bigger systems where there's a bunch of franchisees out there, the only franchise resale you're ever going to see as an outsider is the one that every single franchisee in the system doesn't want.
What's interesting is I disagree a little bit with that. I think there are sometimes neighboring franchisees that can't afford it, don't want to deal with it, have capacity. I've never talked about this publicly. My wife and I recently tried to buy a budget blinds resale, a very strong operating one. And it was it felt like it aligned perfectly. My wife has a background selling art, a lot of similarities there. It was operating fairly well. The have owned it for I think 15 years. And we had a meeting set up to go meet with the owners in person. We had already gotten the financials, and I get an email. Hey, we need to cancel our meeting with you. We just went under contract with our neighboring franchisee. I was like, oh man. It was like we really were excited about the opportunity, but that was what happened. But it had been available for a few months at that point. So it was kind of out of nowhere, but there's a tremendous amount of validity in that. Yeah.
I'm not saying it always works this way. It's just common that it does. That's all.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned before, talked about how people can sometimes what was the term you used when people are all doing the same thing?
Oh, lemmings.
Lemmings. There we go. So right now there's this, and not right now, it's happened I'm sure many times over the years, but you have these emerging franchisors that start to get really really hot, and they start to explode, and it becomes this frenzy, and this FOMO starts kicking in, before they're selling quicker, and then it has then the opportunity for the people that are buying to get in and show that the system works at scale. What's your perspective on these kind of fast growing franchisors, and kind of, should people proceed with caution? Like, how should they approach those sort of opportunities?
Yeah, you always should proceed with caution no matter what. I mean, you always should do that. But um, I think that what's really important is that people recognize that if they get in with a young, high growth franchise system, that it's a significantly higher risk profile, that there's going to be a much bumpier ride. They don't have it all figured out yet, right? So when you get in with a young franchise system, they're going to be changing the system. They're going to be adjusting it. Stuff they tell you is not going to work as well as it should. There's going to be early adapters who are going to get unhappy at some point, and they're going to say, "Oh, I don't like this," and the franchisor is not treating us right. This is a normal path of growth in a franchise system. So if you get in with a young franchise like that, you have to be very aware that it's a higher risk and that you have to be willing to deal with the fact that it's going to be a bumpier ride. Um, I would tell you that generally speaking, and you look at my book and everything else, I prefer that people get into proven franchise concepts where you can talk to a bunch of franchisees, you can build your P&Ls, you know for a fact it works. That is what I prefer. It's not always possible. That's the problem. There's some areas out there in this country where finding a large proven franchise system that's not already sold out is close to impossible, right? Very, very difficult. Or if you wait too long, somebody else will buy it. And if you want to do it, you've got to be willing to step in ahead of time. So even though I say that I prefer large existing proven franchise systems, myself, along with a couple of partners, we just joined a franchise system about a year and a half ago. And we signed our contracts before the first franchised location opened. Now, they had 15 of their own franchise. They had their 15 of their own thing, but they were all in one part of the United States, which was not Florida. They didn't know what they were doing. And I sat down with my business partners who are not franchising people ahead of time, and we had a pretty honest conversation. I was like, this is what's going to happen, right? We're going to do this. We're going to have mistakes. It's not going to work. It's going to take us longer than we expect. It's going to be a bumpy ride. And we need to be willing to deal with the fact that that's going to happen. And it has. And we've had laughs about that. We get on the phone and we're like, you told us that was going to happen. I said, yeah, it's happening as it normally does. It's a bumpy ride. But we really wanted to be part of the franchise system. We felt like it was a great business that truly would help people in our community. And we wanted to be part of the franchise system. So we were willing to take that risk. And
Yeah. What when you have folks that approach you, and that are working with you and say, Rick, I'm open-minded, man. I just want something that makes a lot of money. What what do you say to that? How do you approach that conversation?
Well, I, I would probably just ask him, so exactly tell me how much you want so I can get you the right one. I mean, make a joke out of it because the reality is that that's not actually true. I mean, people don't want a business that makes a lot of money. They want a business that solves a problem for them. And that is not necessarily, money's not really it. It might be part of it, but it's not usually what's really the driver. Um,
What is the driver?
the driver is that they have some kind of an issue they're trying to resolve. It could be that they have a money issue, um, but if they just want to make as much money as possible, as fast as possible, a job is a better way to go, right? There has to be another reason. I mean, because if somebody says, I just want to make as much money as possible, I said, then why would you be looking at business ownership? Why does business ownership solve that issue for you? Why do you think business ownership solves that issue for you? Why wouldn't a job solve that issue for you better and faster? Because it would. You get a job, they start paying you a month later, a week later. I don't know how people get paid on salaries these days and how often they get paid, but they get paid pretty regularly, right, when they have a job. And you can get a job, they get paid regularly, and it solves the financial issue faster. So the real question is, why do you want to be a business owner? In some cases, it's they totally misunderstand what it means to be a business owner. And I don't know, but you just have to start asking questions. I don't know. You ask questions and you start learning about what a person is really trying to accomplish. Business ownership very well may not be the right answer. I don't know.
Yeah. And when you look back at, again, because you've been doing this for many years now, when you look back at some of the folks that you've helped buy that have been successful, what are some of the common themes or characteristics that when you look back at the process of working with them or seeing just how they think and operate, what have been some of the characteristics that you've seen about that person and that individual in terms of the way that they think, the way that they behave?
They are um, they're focused. They have a plan. They are they have grit. They're willing to stick with it. They are comfortable with the concept of delayed gratification. They're comfortable with keeping their eye on the long-term vision as opposed to the short-term challenges. And that's really, I think, probably very, very important. I I give an example. There's a lady that I worked with back many years ago. Probably we always think about like COVID, and then we think about 2008. Those are our time periods, right? It was prior to 2008, probably 2005 or six or something like that. Again, a lady in Florida here, and she ended up opening up a maid service. And she didn't have a lot of money to invest, but she understood how to manage people. She had a background in people management. And she opened up a maid service, invested, what was it, probably 150 back at the time to do that. And for the first 3 to 4 years, she worked hard. She reinvested her money, she hired people, she worked, she became better at what she was doing. But her goal was to build a large business that allowed her to take 4 international vacations a year. That was her goal, to get to the point where there was enough staff and money and independence out there that she could go on 4 international vacations a year, and the business would continue to operate with her without her being there. First few years were hard. Um, fast forward a decade after opening, she was doing around 4 million a year. She had 2 different cities that she owned, that and another city in a different part of the United States where she also wanted to live. So she opened one over there. She had one in Florida. She's in Florida half the time. She's in this other city half the time. And she's taking 4 international vacations a year. She's working 20 hours a week. Um, and I got a lot of stories like that. But that didn't happen in the first 1 to 2 years. The reason it happened is because she had grit, she had determination, and she understood what it took to get to that vision. You look at business ownership. Business ownership, if you look at any book on wealth creation, right? The fastest road to wealth creation is business ownership. I mean, it just is. Have you heard about the Millionaire Mind? It was a follow-up book to The Millionaire Next Door. So Millionaire Next Door was by Stanley and Danko, and The Millionaire Mind was Stanley coming back and a much more robust thesis on wealth creation in the United States. People make money by building businesses, but it's not always cash flow that creates the wealth. It's asset creation and taxation as well, right? So as they're building it, once you get a business that's making $300,000 a year, you now have an asset on your balance sheet of $1 million, right? On that 3.5x, whatever it happens to be, right? So, and you have tax benefits. So you're not paying the same as somebody who had a salaried income, right? So you look at this stuff, the long-term play is to build a business as possible. And you do that through reinvesting in people, reinvesting in marketing, reinvesting in equipment. You keep reinvesting to spur growth because every time you make an additional dollar of income, you're creating $3.5 of wealth on the other side, right? So that's why people want to get into business from a financial point of view, but that doesn't happen in the first year. If somebody's in a cash flow mentality where I just want a business that gives me cash flow as fast as possible, that's called a job. It's not the game of business ownership. I mean, think about like any of these, whether it's a Gates or any of these guys that we see on TV that are billionaires, right? All these people. Look at what their salary is. Their salary is what, $1 million a year or something like that. Chump change. They can't pay their property taxes for that, right? The way they created wealth was by having ownership and having that ownership increase in value. That's why they're billionaires. That's why Musk's, lost $5 billion of net worth this week because the value of the stock went down. It wasn't his salary. The salary is not where the money is. It's the asset creation and taxation. Obviously, taxation is important too.
Yeah, it's an interesting point because one of the things that I say is that you can't sell your job back to your employer, right? Like if you're making 200K a year, you can't be like, hey, I'm gonna sell this back to you. I'm ready to rock and roll, so I'm gonna sell it back to you at 3x. But that is one of the huge benefits of entrepreneurship. And as you're talking about the whole short term thinking, it's interesting because when I look back at a lot of my failures in starting businesses, it was from kind of having that shiny object syndrome and trying to chase the short-term dollar. And I think that there's such a massive correlation, at least that I've seen in my own life, of failure, of chasing short-term dollar to failure. And the more long-term perspective, I mean, obviously you still have to make money in the short term, but the more long-term the perspective, those are the folks who win, it's so interesting to me.
Think of another way to say the same thing, because I totally agree with you, is that when a business makes $1, there's only three things you can do with it. All right, that dollar of profit can either be reinvested for growth, you can use it to pay down debt, or you can take it home. But you can't do all three with it. You have to choose, right? So those people who are willing to reinvest for growth and forego taking it home as long as possible, tighten up the personal belt in order to reinvest and grow the business, those are the ones that long-term tend to grow longest, fastest, and largest over time because they're constantly reinvesting in growth, assuming you do it smart, obviously. But once you take the money out, the business can't benefit from it, but you can pay your bills, obviously, right? That's important. One other thing I just want to say is you talked about getting a job. You can't sell your job back to your employer. That's true, but we have to keep this conversation balanced, right? You also don't have to buy your job. You don't have to invest in the job. So with a job, you don't have to make an upfront investment. You don't have that upfront risk. You get immediate cash flow. That's the good part of a job. The bad part is you have no wealth. It never sits on your balance sheet as an asset. It doesn't, you can't sell it because you don't own it. The reason you don't own it is because you didn't buy it at the beginning, right?
True. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, the good thing is the fact that you don't have to make an investment, you don't have that risk, and if you're looking for cash flow, it's the fastest, easiest, most risk-free way of creating immediate cash flow. And that's what people should be doing if that's what they need. Um, so yeah, anyhow, just another way to think about what you were talking about.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, Rick, this was awesome. I really enjoyed it. For folks that want to read your book and check it out and get inside your mind, what's the best place for them to go do that and grab that?
First of all, I don't know if you know, there's actually two books. One's called The Educated Franchisee, which is my book that I wrote in 2008. That's now in its third edition. That's sitting right here. The other one is the Franchisee Playbook, which is a workbook format. That's up here. That's the Franchisee Playbook, which is a workbook format taking a lot of the lessons that you find in the Educated Franchisee and actually turning it into a way to actually work through the due diligence process. If you don't want to do it with somebody, you want to do it on your own. We had talked about visioning exercises, about creating a personal vision. The first step in the workbook is creating a personal vision. So that's something that I work through with everybody I work through. We go through that. But as far as getting hold of me, I mean, R Bisio at educatedfranchisee.com, that works. And you can call me, email me. I'm super easy to find. You see my name on the bottom corner, it says Rick Bisio. Google that. The first 15 pages that Google delivers to you will be me. Unless somebody else is putting my name out there to try to, I don't know. But generally speaking, I'm pretty easy to find. My website for my coaching service is called afranchisecoach.com. That's my website, afranchisecoach.com. And if you go there, there's like a contact me form. You can just click in there, and usually within a day, I'll get back. I'll send you my calendar link. You can schedule yourself on my calendar, and we'll talk. Who knows where it'll go. Whatever I can do to help, I'm always there, and I'm always willing.
Yeah, awesome, man. And if you connect with Rick, make sure to tell him that you watched him on the podcast and that you enjoyed it. And sweet, man. Well, thanks so much for doing this. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, just look forward to staying in touch.
Tarek, it's a pleasure. Absolutely. Thanks. This is a lot of fun.
Likewise. Hey, before we go, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please subscribe here on YouTube if you haven't already. And the biggest thank you that you could ever give me is to share this episode with someone who you think will benefit. That means that we can share this message with more people and hopefully positively inspire them like we have you. So thank you. And until next time, go build your empire.